every year, you have the question of who is going to be the worst team in the NFL. And before week 3, we probably would have guessed it was the Panthers. Well, Andy Dalton has them looking pretty okay. But now there is a single team that is 0-4 heading into Monday Night Football, who surely are hoping that the Titans join them. The real big question now is who is the worst team in the league? And while the Titans surely do have a good case, there's the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've lost to both the Browns and the Dolphins, and of course, last week they lost 47-10 in a blowout loss to the Bills. This week really looked like maybe the Jags had figured it out a bit, but I guess not. I want to give credit where it's due. They did play the Texans hard, and it looked like they probably should have won the game, but they didn't. Instead, they blew it late and lost 24-20. Being 0-4 is absolutely heartbreaking, but dropping to 0-4 in that fashion is even worse. It leaves a lot of questions, like Doug Peterson's job security, or whether or not Trevor Lawrence is actually good. At this point, I'd say there really aren't many positives in Jacksonville. Fall is here. The leaves are falling, and more importantly, there is football on every weekend. And you can make every weekend even more exciting by getting in on the action with our partners over at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet just $5 will get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using our promo code JDPROD, and the crown is yours. That's $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. And you can stay in on the action and use those $200 in bonus bets to bet on anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy. So again, download the DraftKings app now. New customers who use our promo code JDPROD and bet just $5 will get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code JDPROD only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Thank you again to DraftKings for sponsoring today's video. Let's get right back to it. This game was absolutely insane, and the Jags really should have won this game. But in Jacksonville fashion, they just couldn't hold on to the lead. This really was a good, close game the whole way through. Both offenses were able to produce good, fun plays, but don't let that fool you. There was also a ton of punts, with 11 total. The Jags got to scoring first on a 2-yard touchdown pass to Brian Thomas Jr., but the Texans didn't wait long to respond, scoring just 5 minutes later on a long 70-yard drive, capped off by a 6-yard Stephon Diggs run-in. That tied the game up at 7s, but the Jags would end up drilling a 41-yard field goal to go up 10-7 going into the second quarter. Then both the Texans and Jags punted back and forth, and after another long 74-yard drive from Houston, they scored on a 3-yard Nico Collins touchdown pass. Jacksonville really had no answer to the Collins and Stroud connection all day. They were eating together. Collins ended the day with 151 yards on 12 receptions with a touchdown. Just a great day. And he's clearly solidified himself as Stroud's wide receiver 1. And that's even with Diggs having a really good day as well. That made the score 14-10 with Houston leading. Jacksonville did drive down and hit another field goal before the half, but again, Houston responded, hitting one of their own to go into the half up 17-13. These teams had just been exchanging blows the entire first half, but it really did feel like Houston had an answer to everything Jacksonville threw at them, and it's safe to say that that trend continued into the second half. Now, it was a brutal slow start to the half, with the Texans punting twice, with a Jacksonville punt sandwiched in between, so 3 back-to-back-to-back punts. But finally, the Jags scored on an 8-yard Christian Kirk touchdown catch to end a 74-yard drive. The Texans couldn't do anything to respond and had to punt again, and it was starting to feel like Jacksonville, despite everything this season, was going to be able to extend this lead and really put the pressure on the Texans and potentially win this game. But that didn't happen, and the following drive was a brutal one. The Jags did move the ball really well, and it helped that Tank Bigsby had a 58-yard rush that took the Jags all the way down to the 4-yard line of Houston. And obviously, when you get to that point of the field, it's 4-down territory. The Texans stuffed them every single time, and it brought up 4th and goal on the Houston 1-yard line. And they didn't get it. They turned it over on downs after all that distance. Now, luckily for them, Houston wasn't able to capitalize on that, and thus followed an array of punts from both teams teams, but finally Houston got the ball back with 2:54 remaining in the fourth quarter, down 3, and they pulled off a miracle. Houston drove 69 beautiful yards down the field, capping it off with a 1-yard touchdown pass to running back Dare Ogunbowale with 18 seconds remaining. And just like that, Houston takes the lead. Jacksonville did get the ball back, but there really just wasn't enough time, and that was it. The Jags came oh so close to winning this game. And I will say, Trevor Lawrence wasn't absolutely awful. I mean, he threw 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. But this loss specifically just feels like it sucks all the life out of any hopes that this team had for this season. This is a team that has had high expectations in the past. Maybe too high of expectations, but still. And they just really have never lived up to them. And there comes a time where you have to take a step back and really reevaluate the decisions you made to get to this point. Now, the Texans, I believe, are a good team. And the fact that you had them on the ropes really does speak volumes, but it's kind of pointless now that you're 0-4. Doug Peterson's seat has to be getting warm, and Trevor Lawrence is slowly but surely falling into a mediocre quarterback role. He was once the first overall pick and touted as one of the greatest quarterback prospects the NFL had ever seen, and so far, that just hasn't been the case. A single comeback playoff win is not enough of a resume to deem this Jags era successful. They need to win more. They need to have more postseason success. And I think it's safe to say that that just isn't going to come this season, at least not anymore. There's a good chance that this Jags team ends up being the worst team in football. I mean, roster-wise, I'm not really sure if that statement is true, but the record doesn't lie. Jacksonville now finds themselves in the same conversation as teams that were projected to be the worst in the league to start the year, and Jacksonville certainly was not in that conversation, but now they are. It's really ugly in Jacksonville, and they need to figure it out quick, but this season might as well be a wash. Now, contrary to prior seasons, the Jaguars didn't have the craziest expectations coming into this season, and I think a lot of that is because of just how good the Texans were last year. The reality is, the Texans are now the kings of the AFC South, but the Jags were supposed to be at least goodish, but so far, they haven't been. In week 1, they barely lost to the Dolphins 20-17, and that was when Tua Tagovailoa was actually playing before he got hurt the next week. So even though that was a loss, there was still some good that you could have taken away from that, but the following loss in week 2 to the Browns was ugly. Deshaun Watson is just putting on an absolute masterclass of how not to play quarterback in the NFL, and to be the first team to lose to the sorry-ass Browns really is brutal. That's a game that you have to win if you're not a terrible team. And well, the Jags lost 18-13. And of course, there was the big Bills loss. Yes, the Bills are a good team, but that was a complete bullying. The Jags, truthfully, didn't even look like they were playing the same sport out there. Josh Allen just steamrolled them and did whatever he wanted to the Jags defense. That 47-10 score looks really bad, but even worse when you consider that it really feels like the Bills took their foot off the gas. It was 34-3 at the half, and the game was essentially already over. So the game ended with Mitch Trubisky on the field, dueling it out with Patriots legend Mac Jones. It was just a complete embarrassment in primetime to drop to 0-3. The Jags really did have a chance to turn everything around and figure things out and look like a respectable team against this Texans team who was just coming off of a 34-7 loss to the Vikings last week. But instead, the Jags play a good game only to blow it and fall to 0-4. It really leaves a ton of questions, like will Doug Peterson still be the coach by the end of the season? And not only that, but what does that mean for Trevor Lawrence? Obviously, the most important thing for any team's future is to have a franchise quarterback, and you really have to take a step back and ask yourselves if the Jaguars actually have one or not. Trevor Lawrence got a 5-year, $275 million extension, and he isn't even on his 5th-year option yet. The Jags have already poured everything into him, and you gotta wonder if that's gonna come back to bite them. Trevor was supposed to be generational. I mean, everyone thought he would be. It was tank for Trevor season, but it hasn't gone super well in retrospect. His rookie year was obviously a complete disaster, and everyone knows that. You really have to wonder just how much damage Urban Meyer did to him in that 1 year. Trevor hasn't turned into the guy that we all thought he could be, and you do have to think that that hurt Trevor a lot, especially being such a young guy trying to develop. He ended up throwing 17 interceptions with only 12 touchdowns. It was really bad, and it eventually got Meyer fired. They went 3-14, but things changed really fast once Doug Peterson got hired. He immediately turned them around to a winning record at 9-8, and even made the playoffs where they had that insane comeback win against the Chargers before losing the next week. It was such a quick change for Trevor, but it's not like they've really progressed much since then. They ended up with the same record last year, and it just really completely fell apart down the stretch. They should have been a good team that made it to the playoffs, but instead the wheels just fell off and changed a lot of the thoughts on the Jags. Trevor regressed from 21 touchdowns and 14 interceptions from 25 touchdowns and 8 interceptions the year before. And now this year, he really hasn't been that great. He does have 4 touchdowns and only 1 interception, but he just hasn't been that impressive. I think at this point, it really feels like Trevor won't be some bad NFL quarterback, but he surely isn't elite. The question now becomes if he will ever be elite. Now, the good news is that he's only 24 years old and has plenty of time, but we're still not seeing what Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be coming out of college after dominating at Clemson. Now, how much of that is on him and how much of that is on the coach, I don't know. But it's not like the Jags haven't tried to improve the team around him. The Jags really have tried to put better weapons around Trevor Lawrence. I think trading for Calvin Ridley was really the big point where they did try to build around Trevor, but Ridley really didn't end up being a game breaker, even though he was good. Christian Kirk is still there, obviously, and he's turned out to be a great signing. I really loved watching him in Arizona, and I thought that he was a good signing, even though people said that he got overpaid. But clearly, it's worked out because he's now one of Trevor's top weapons. They also went out and signed Gabe Davis, who was at least pretty good with the Bills. I think he's a good number 2, but the Jags weren't even close to done. They went out and they drafted Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU in the first round, and he could really turn into a good wide receiver. I mean, for what it is, that's a pretty good 3-guy receiver rotation, and it'll be even better once Evan Ingram is actually healthy and able to play. Then, of course, Trevor has his guy, Travis Etienne, who he played with at Clemson and had a ton of success with. He's turned into a good NFL back, and having Tank Bigsby behind him is only a plus. There are a few good pieces for sure, but it's not great. The Jaguars do have some good talent, but it's really not showing right now, and it could shake out to be a really long year in Jacksonville.